email me afterwards, and I will give you that email address afterwards. So teaching grammar, teens to adults. Now I have it very focused, and later I will talk about teaching grammar to young learners as well. But some things to remember is, while this is just an overview, so I'll give you resources where you can get really fantastic resources and lessons, and it goes more into depth about it because it's such a big topic. But also, you have to consider your circumstances, and you have to consider the level of the students. You have to consider what they are used to, and that's something that I found out when I was teaching in various different countries. So when I was teaching in Greece, I taught to refugees, and then I taught in Germany, and I taught to mixed capacities and mixed levels and mixed countries, but I also taught to groups that were as well all one language, that all spoke German. So I've dealt with different ones, but one thing for sure is, and even teaching in Texas, I taught lots of teenagers that is to throw away the worksheets. And there's a reason for this, because good grammar teaching involves a lot. And we'll talk about testing as well. But the thing about the type of learning and the type of learning you learn in worksheets with grammar is it's a lot of drill, but it's not internalized by the student. So it's really important that our students internalize these grammar structures and really get to understand what the grammar is and how to use the grammar. And I don't think worksheets are very effective for that, and it's not a very effective kind of time that you can spend in the classroom. If you're going to give worksheets, then give them after class. If you have to, I think that's the best way to deal with it if you have to. Now, I have seen books. I'm not saying do away with course books, because there are good books out there, and especially for grammar, that show the structure and they show the way the structure works. And I think that's fine. So we'll talk about that later. But the important thing about testing, okay, so we teach grammar for several reasons. It's one of the ways that our students are able to understand and really play with the language, and they're not going to be able to go further unless they understand these grammar structures. That's the reality of it. But one of the most important reasons, too, is at the end, many of your students have to pass a test. It could be the IELTS, it could be the TOEFL, it doesn't matter. But when you think about the grammar section, and all of them have a grammar section, and it's going to test it, it's really important that you keep that test in mind, and not because you want to teach to the test, but at some point you have to teach grammar in the way that the students are going to be tested. So this is, before I show you the different ways to teach grammar, when you think about your tests that your students, think about the tests that your students have to take right now. How are they tested for the grammar? Is it only written? You can type this in the chat box. How else are they tested? Okay, so they do have a written section where they look at a sentence, and then they have to identify the correct words, and they have to do the verb agreements. Yes, that's part of it. But what are other parts of it that are part of these tests now? Part of it is they have some oral exams as well. They have listening, and so they have to be able to speak the language as well. They have to listen to recordings and things. So even with the testing, if you take the format of the testing, multiple choice, free writing as well, but a lot of them have oral exams and a lot of them have audio exams. So I think even with the testing, the format of the test, we tend not to teach this way grammar, but it's important that we use these forms, because even in the test, they're going to be tested on this listening and speaking and other types of forms. It's not just the written forms. So I'm going to cover a lot of things today, but the master, the one that you should absolutely follow, and you should even, and he doesn't work with American TESOL, but definitely Scott Thornberry is the guru when it comes to grammar teaching, and he really can show you the different ways to teach. Even with the worksheet, he has examples. And I really recommend this one, How to Teach Grammar. And he goes how to teach with structures and rules, and he gives you sample lessons in different levels. But Scott really breaks down the language for you, and he really makes it to where you can have it accessible to learners. As an American and a native speaker, we actually are at a disadvantage because we're not taught grammar correctly. A lot of people will tell you that. And when I took my CELTA with Marissa Constantinidis, and I'll show you something that she showed us later. It was actually a very good thing that I wasn't very good at the grammar part. And the reason was is because then I had to think about the best way that I learned grammar in a different language. So when I was learning German, when I was learning Greek, when I was learning Spanish and the different languages, and I realized that there are certain things that I appreciate for grammar structures. And so one of the things is teaching the rule. And Scott talks about teaching the rule in his book, How to Teach Grammar. And so one of the steps that you can do if you decide to do it this way, and this is the most common form, this is the form that I was taught in my CELTA, is you write an example sentence on the board. For example, in Scott's book, it's like the president phoned the Pope or something. Okay, so you write this on the board, and then you can erase and you can replace words. The student phoned the teacher. The girl phoned her boyfriend, and then you can replace. And then you can ask the students. Well, you can elicit more examples from the students. This is a typical way you would teach. Then you can explain the structure further. You can use it in the past. Yes, exactly, Bob, substitution. And then you can, but when you're explaining it further, and something that Marissa is really good about, and this is kind of the PPP type of method as well, is you have to watch out when you're doing this for the meta language. You know, before we talk about, oh, well, this is the past tense, and this is the first conditional, this isn't going to really help our students that much, and it's not going to it's not going to register to them. So if you do this approach, which you probably do, and you introduce the rule or the structure at some point, you have to make sure that you say it in a way that your students are going to get it. And yes, we may want to say everything you learned from our CELTA or all this knowledge that we learned about the structure, but really when we're in the class, we have to be at the level of our students, and especially if it's beginner or pre-intermediate, we really have to just explain the structure and substitute and elicit examples. And then you can have the students practice in pairs, practice the structure in pairs, and then you can have them create their own personalized examples. Now that's just one way. Well, you may ask about other things, and I don't know why it's not here. Oh, I had this other. Okay, so anyway, so there was a thing that talked about drilling and all of these great things that you learn when you're taking a teacher training course. And does it work? Well, okay, I'm going to talk about Emergent later and how that's very effective, and I think more effective, and Scott talks about that as well, and collocations and things like that. But I have seen a lesson where drilling works, and I think it was very effective. I tried it with my students. So we're going to go through this lesson right now. And so this could be a typical way of teaching grammar, but I think is an effective way because it incorporates different things, and it kind of follows the structure that I said before. So, okay, so this is Olga. Let me introduce you to Olga. So you're in a lesson now, okay? Now, Olga she used to be, what do you think she's feeling there? What are her emotions? She used to be very happy, okay? This would be like maybe a pre-intermediate, intermediate student. But now, what happened to Olga that she is no longer happy anymore? If you can't understand what I'm saying, if you go over my video, you can just click the pause, and that'll probably make it better for you. Now this I actually learned on an online TESOL course, so this is kind of fine. Okay, so why wouldn't Olga be happy anymore? I'm eliciting here. You're the student. Yes, prison. What about prison and Olga? Because she's now in prison. Olga decided to rob a bank because her boyfriend needed money. It's a sad, sad, sad tale. So Olga used to be able to do things, but now that she's in prison, she can't do this anymore. So what are some things that she used to be able to do? Well, so Olga used to what? Just by looking at this picture. What did she used to do? You can come up with anything. You're the student. Okay, so she used to drive posh cars, but now she what? We have to finish it. So she used to drive posh cars, but now she walks. Okay, so maybe now she walks in prison. Anybody else? How about this one? Olga used to what? But now that she's in prison. Okay, she used to, okay, she used to hang out, but now she doesn't. She used to spend a lot of money. She used to earn money. Used to have cash. But now, okay, so we're talking about when Olga was no longer in prison, when she used to not be in prison, but now she is in prison. And usually on the board, it's a little bit easier. And usually there's like drawings you can do and you can have the students. But this was a lot of fun for my students, and they came up with things just by looking at the pictures, and there was a lot of eliciting there. And there's also drilling as well. You can drill the structure. Now, what is the structure that I'm drilling here? What am I teaching them? Because I am teaching them a grammar structure. Used to, exactly, okay? And then we can get very specific, um, about the past, and yeah, exactly. We can talk about but we don't have to do that. The thing is here is that I already told you, well, she used to be happy, but now she's in prison. So now these are things she can do anymore. She used to, earn a lot of money and then spend, and the students come up with some really funny stuff. She used to, she used to have a boyfriend, but now they're divorced. She used to go to the beach, but now she works out in the hot sun, and things like that to compare her life. So I have seen this and used this kind of a lesson, and it worked really well. My learners loved it. I used it for pre-intermediate. They really felt that they learned the structure. And I think for specific structures, so yes, they're going to say used to at some point in time. And at some point in time, they're going to need to practice things like conditionals and problem areas. And I think that some of the grammar that we teach, yes, I think it is emergent, but there are some structures that we do have to review and that we have to drill, and that we have to teach in a way that they understand first and they get it, and that we can revise that kind of language as well. Grammar should be contextualized. So that's the thing about different worksheets. It doesn't contextualize the language. It doesn't show it in different settings. It doesn't show where, yeah, exactly. It has to be situational. We have to have a story behind it. So we used to, and it was contextualized. Olga used to be able to do things in her past, and now she isn't. And then you can have the students get together in pairs, and then they can come up with things that they used to do when they were younger, but now they don't do anymore. Things they used to do before they had to work and get a job, things that they can't do anymore that they got a job, when they used to go to school, grammar school, and now. So contextualize it, make it close to home, things that they're going to learn. Natural, if they come up with other different kinds of circumstances and stuff, then it's good for students to be able to do that. It should be things that they're going to use, so it should be really natural flowing as well. Yes, well, I think every type of grammar should be spoken. So Ola Bakri, that's a very good question. She says, so you depend on speaking to use the concept. Yes, I think it's very important that they use the concept as practice. Um, it should be emergent, and I'll show you the emergent approach in a little bit that I was able to see, which is different than introducing the grammar that you just saw. Now, I'm not saying those lessons, one is better than the other, but at some point, especially with higher levels, you can do emergent language. And then see the language they already have within them, and then you can come up on the board and you can write down the structures that come out of it. It should be language that is necessary to them. The problem with a lot of course books is it teaches them language that's maybe British English or something like that that they're not going to use. So we have to make sure that the things we pick and choose from the book, they're going to be able to use. We can ask our learners, well, what do you use every day when you use your language. You know, what are some of the phrases that you hear? What are some of you know, do you use the past tense? And talk to them about it. It should be built upon. In other words, when you teach them the structure, when you teach them the rule, um, it varies so much. So whatever you do teach them, give them several examples and substitutions so that way they can build upon it when they get into a situation where they have to use that particular grammar structure. They're able to build upon it and say, hey, I remember this, so maybe I can apply the same context. And if they mess up, that's okay. That's okay if they mess up because they're supposed to. And then use various ways and various examples. For example, make it visual. This is Chia, and she does a really great job. I got to observe her lesson, but she does a really great job here of showing you the chart here, and you are probably familiar with this tense chart, but it really does help the learners. It's something that helped me when I learned my languages, you know, learn German and Spanish. I like to have the charts. I like to have words, and then I like to have the conjugation, and this helps me as a learner. This shouldn't be the whole lesson. I've had teachers and that's the whole lesson. Instead, the way Chia did it here was that she was doing just a regular conversation lesson. And this is sort of emergence as well, as she used timelines. Yes, thank you, Adam. And but it came about. So it wasn't, she stopped after a time of conversation and then she reviewed the grammar that came out of that conversation. So she did not introduce, oh, we're going to talk about the past or the present or the structure. Instead, she used the visuals to show language and grammar that was already used, which I think was very good. We can actually make teaching grammar fun. How do we do that? Well, there's a couple of ways. You can actually just play games. So sometimes we need to review certain structures. Maybe they need it for the test. Maybe they're just struggling. You can tell that a lot of them are struggling on one. If you go to Boggles World, you're going to see all of these games on Boggles World, board games, and you can adapt them. And that's the great thing about Boggles World. So you can play board games, and when they land, it's really great. They practice their speaking. Let's see, here we go. Here's the link for that. But they practice speaking and they roll the dice, and basically this one shows the past and present. It looks a little like this. You can add graphics, make it look pretty. So when they land on it, then they have to come up with a sentence or something with it, and then they can play for points and stuff like that. And this has so many different types of structures as well. Marissa has a really good game here as well. I'm sorry, Emerald. It could be your internet connection, but if you just hover over my camera and then you pause it or click the X, then it would probably be better for yours. So Marissa does this one. This is called Grammar Consequences, and it's to practice the different parts of speech. And she says you can even make it for young learners. And so how? The teacher writes example sentences on the board, as well as a part of speech is like this, and then she puts the example for old learners, for young learners. And then you play a game of consequences. So each student will write a word called out by the teacher, folds the paper, passes on to the next, and then they call another category. And then they correct the sentences and summary sentences.
There's an unusual problem in Verbo City.
Army of ants has appeared from nowhere.
And they're stealing all of articles.
This is a job for Grammar Man.
I don't understand, Alphabot. These specimens we captured will eat nothing but articles. I wish there was a way of communicating with these article ants. Hey, it spoke, and it sounded like same language syntax speaks.
Sure enough.
Nurple, blah.
They've been talking for more than an hour.
Follow me. Article ants have nest in park. We can meet Queen Ant. Gerp.
So, this is where all missing articles are.
Blob, funt. Grammar Man, article ants crashed here 2 weeks ago.
Webster's beard! It's UFO! These ants are from space.
My advanced brain will make this repair job easy.
And so,
Our little friends can return to their own planet now. There's only one thing left to do now, reader, and that's to return these articles to their correct places in this story. Can you help?
Hey, it worked, finally. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't too. Okay, so I'm gonna stop sharing that. But I like grammar, man. I think it's something that the students can watch, and it's something that they can watch, and they can even make their own examples too. So if they're trying to learn certain structures and they have to know that for tests and stuff like that, then it's definitely a much better way than using a worksheet. Okay, so emergent lesson. What's the difference? Well, we did a lesson where we kind of introduced the structure, but it was hidden. Okay, I didn't explicitly introduce the structure, and I think it's better if you don't actually, because I think it should be natural. Back to that slide that said, what is effective grammar teaching? It should be natural and emergent. So this is Chia again, super Chia, and so what happened here was that it was a discussion, and that's what happens with emergence. And there are other people that can explain it a lot better than me. And the source that I gave you at the beginning, which was Scott Thornberry, talks about dog meat and dog meat teaching. But what happens is basically you teach whatever your lesson is going to be based on. Okay, so it could be maybe you're going to do a speed dating lesson at the time, or maybe you're going to do a business English where you watch your body movements, or you talk about negotiation. And so you're not teaching the grammar in that particular lesson. So what you're doing instead is you're just talking about the topic, something that your students are going to use in their particular type of setting. And then when you hear a structure come out from the student's mouth, like maybe they use the past condition, the past tense, or they use conditionals, then you write that on the board and you say, okay, after the conversation flow has died down, then you introduce the grammar. Then you use your visuals, then you use your drilling, whatever type of comfortable kind of concept you learned in your training. Then you can come out, and then you can use it, and then you can cover it. And this is another type of emergent way to teach. Now, there's other things that you can do as well. If you have, for example, my students, I had German students, and they were very particular about structures, and they really did want to know some of the meta language. That happens. So if your adult students are at higher levels and they do want to know very keen things, one of the things that I do is on a wiki, I go to the wiki and I give them further exploration so they can make it very personalized, the type of grammar that they want to learn. So I have things like a video, and they have quizzes, and when they go to these quizzes, it's sort of like the worksheet where they fill it out, but some of it is not. Some of it is like dictation where they listen to the grammar and then they write it down, and then they have to answer questions, or they have to answer questions to a video, and this is their choice. I say, okay, this is where you can go. You can, if you really want to practice this a lot more, if you feel like you didn't do very well in conditionals, and that way I can say things during the feedback, like afterwards I tell my students, okay, well, Bob, you weren't very good with conditionals today, but you can practice more here, or here's more practice, and or how about this lesson? And I try to make it very individualized in that kind of way. And then somebody else who had a problem with the past tense, and I say, well, look, this is a great website to practice the past tense. And I try to make it to where it's not multiple choice quizzes and stuff, to where it's something like they listen to podcasts and they have to listen to questions. So these are things that you can do as well. But this is only a synopsis of all the things that you can do for adults, and hopefully I've taught you different ways that you can present grammar. Like, you can present the role, you can present the structure, and that's how you begin with. Or you can do something where you present a scenario, a story, like we did with Olga. This is Olga. Olga used to be happy, but now Olga is very sad. She's in prison. And then we did the used to and used to. The students, you elicit from them, from the structure, you can drill them from the structure, you can correct the structure while you're drilling it, and then afterwards you put them in pairs and they come up with their own used to statements from their life. So this is one step. This is kind of a hidden kind of grammar teaching where you didn't pinpoint the actual structure, but they know it because you keep writing on the board, used to. So you are pinpointing the structure. You just, didn't say it at the beginning. Or you can do something where it's more emergent, where you have your whatever you're talking about, whatever the lesson is. It could be about cars or anything. And then from there, you pick out and you just listen to the structures that they're using. And some lessons will tend to bring out certain structures. And so that's one thing that I think is really important as well, is if you feel that there's a structure that they're struggling with and you want to revise, well, then you can find a topic or a lesson that it'll naturally come out of. So if, for example, you're talking about a bucket list, then you're going to talk about things in the past, things in the future, what you would like to do in the future, things that you have already accomplished in the past on your bucket list. So, I mean, there's some things that will lend itself to natural structure as well. So you can find many, many more great things, like I said at the beginning. If you go to Scott's blog, the A to Z of teaching, and he talks a lot more about emergent teaching as well. I recommend that as a grammar teacher, you need a couple of things, okay? First, you need a really great grammar book. And you can find one with Scott Thornberry. I do recommend his grammar book. You need one that explains it for you in case you come up with structures that maybe for your students that you always know. You can show them and you can direct them, and it's okay to say, I'm not really sure, but here, I can show you, or I'll study up on it, and then I can tell you, more about the structure. So you need a good grammar book that's going to explain grammar to you very well. And Aniko's suggesting, you can suggest grammar books right now that you use for your own understanding of the English language structure and grammar. And then another one is you need a good teaching grammar book. And so that's where Scott Thornberry comes along, because Scott's books are very, very good with that. And then I showed you some sites to make it fun and revise through games and things like that. So if you have any questions, or if you have any ideas how you teach, or any book recommendations or blog recommendations that deal with grammar, you can let us know right now. But thank you very, very much. And if you need to get a hold of me, you can just email me at shellyterrell@gmail.com. And you can find many of the links here. Okay, so Adam says, Parrot, a grammar for English teachers. Okay, thank you. Grammar Way, Ella says Grammar Way. Teaching Tenses by Rosemary Etkin. Okay, Bob. Yeah, I used that one in the Sultan. That one was really, really good.